Hello everyone, this is Tushita Gupta, ACCA affiliate, and we are continuing with the revisions of the chapter-wise PM syllabus. So this is chapter number 4, which is about specialist cost and management accounting techniques. So over here we have a lot of different, costing techniques, the costs and management accounting techniques, the different sorts of techniques that there are, and we study about the possible benefits, the possible suitability, that in what a scenario these are suitable and in which scenarios these are not. So let's dive deep into this chapter. So first of all, this chapter talks about the changes in manufacturing. So what kind of these cost and management accounting techniques are primarily used in manufacturing environments. So basically, in the recent times, these manufacturing environments have evolved over time. Manufacturing essentially in the world started with the industrial revolution, which happened in back in the day. It started in the UK and then went on over the rest of the world also. So basically, with this revolution, there were a lot of new setups where manufacturing hubs were, set up to produce goods for large consumption in mass quantities. So basically, these management accounting techniques have been devised according to those manufacturing environments. But over these years, the manufacturing environments have also changed. It's only natural that with time, things are changing. So currently, what are the changes that we can observe in the manufacturing environment are: number one, with respect to the labor. So with respect to labor, you will see that, the importance and the use of your direct labor has decreased with more and more machines being, produced, with more and more automation that there is. The labor, the use the use and the importance of labor has basically decreased over the years. Now, another thing which we can talk about when it comes to changes in manufacturing environments is the inventory. So usually, when it comes to inventory in today's times, so these are shorter and more frequent production runs rather than continuous and high volume production runs, because we live in a very fast moving dynamic world. So in this dynamic world, that fashion trends also are changing, very fast. So instead of, making a continuous and high volume, which earlier used to be the case, but now what we are doing is we are doing more frequent, because the to adapt to the changing environment. Instead of it being continuous, more frequently there are changes, and these are shorter runs. So instead of continuous, they are shorter, because in order to adapt to the trends that there are, it is changing. Then another change that we observe with respect to the quality. Now, in today's time, the customer is the king. Earlier, the manufacturer was the king. He used to decide what's the price and, how many people are going to get access to their products. But today, quality, because the consumers demand quality, there is more focus on quality control, as in what the customer demands is what they should be getting. Then another thing that is changing over the years is the environmental focus. So, earlier in the times, the more focus was on economic growth and prosperity. But these days, the organizations are also, beginning to realize how important the environment is. We are continuously polluting the resources, depleting the environment's resources. So, not only are the firms realizing this, the regulators, the consumers, everyone is, demanding that organizations take care of the environment while they are producing the goods that they make. So this is basically all that we talk about with respect to the changes that there are in the manufacturing environments. So basically, if we talk about the modern costing techniques, so the modern costing techniques which are there in your syllabus, which we'll also be discussing one by one. So basically, the techniques are activity-based costing, then you will learn target costing, then you will also learn life cycle costing. So these are basic, different sorts of techniques that are basically used. You'll also learn about throughput accounting, and then there's definitely the environmental management accounting. So these are basically the modern costing techniques which are used in today's time, considering the following changes are there in today's manufacturing environment. So these are the modern costing techniques. Now we talk about ABC. ABC is the first technique that we are going to be discussing. So first of all, when we talk about ABC, what are the reasons why this activity-based costing developed? So basically, when we talk about overheads, uh, activity-based costing is primarily for overhead, for a better allocation of your overheads. So basically, the reasons why first of all ABC actually developed is basically that overheads used to be in a small proportion in relation to your other costs which are there in traditional manufacturing. But in today's time, in the environment that we are in today, overheads are a larger proportion of your total costs. So earlier, the overheads, the if I summarize what I just said, so earlier overheads were of a lesser proportion, but overheads were lesser, but today overheads are more. So when overheads are more, the allocation will make sense if it is more clear, if it is more justified, if what is actually costing us the money, then we should get to know the exact cause why we are spending that money, because the overheads have increased today. So that is why this is one of the reasons why ABC was developed. Now, another reason that we can possibly, attribute why ABC was actually developed is because, there is a an increase in the diversity and complexity of products. So, what do we mean? Let's understand both of these terminologies one by one. So, when it comes to diversity, that means, the kind of products earlier that there were, it was very simple environment that, maybe if there are caps, then only one design of caps. So, but in today's environment, there will be millions of different designs. So, there will be diversity and there will also be complexity in the sense that earlier there used to be simple products, but now they are with all of the features that you want. So the complexity of the products has also increased, and basically these two are the reasons why ABC had to be developed. Now, before we get on to understanding ABC in more detail, we're also going to run a comparison between your traditional absorption costing and your ABC. So basically, when you compare these two methods, under your absorption costing, your production related activity levels are used. So all the overheads that you're going to be apportioning, these are going to be based on the level of activity. However, when you are using ABC, you will also see both the production and non-production related activity levels are used. So basically, over here, if it's like the number of units, over here, you will also be considering the non-production activities. So production and non-production activity levels are used. So this is one difference that we have in traditional absorption costing and ABC. Now, another thing, when ABC costing, the absorption costing will be more suitable when the direct costs are high. Obviously, because the overheads are less, so it does not really matter that you know apportionment of overheads will not really matter so much if the proportion is lesser. However, when you are, the indirect costs when are high, then it will matter because the way they are allocated, it's going to affect how much costs that they are incurring. And, we'll get to know that because of this product, we are spending this much money. So it should be priced accordingly as well. So it is more suitable. ABC costing is more suitable when your indirect costs or when your overheads are high. So this is another point of comparison between these two methods. Then absorption costing will also be more suitable when the product range is narrow. That means you're offering limited number of products, because if you're incurring overheads over a limited number of products, the allocation itself will not make a lot of difference. But when it comes to an environment where you are offering a wide range of products, so wide range of products, that is why, that is when actually your ABC will be more suitable. So wider range of products. So this is another point of comparison that we can do within these two methods. Then absorption costing will also be suitable in an environment where there are lesser machines. So, absorption costing belongs to the times that used to prevail earlier. So earlier overheads used to be less, the production range was very narrow, there were lesser machines. But today there are more machines. ABC costing will definitely be more useful in more suitable in an environment where there are a significant number of machines being used. Now, another point of comparison that we can have is that, under absorption costing, it is more suitable when there's a long product life cycle due to less competition. So in the earlier times, back in the day, there used to be lesser competition because the manufacturers itself were limited. So it is more suitable when there are long product cycles with less competition. But in today's time, when there is a high competition and the product life cycle is increasingly getting smaller, high competition, and the lifespan of the products has become very small, because like I said, the trends are changing, ever changing. So in such a situation, again, ABC will be more useful. Now let us talk about the advantages and disadvantages of ABC. So first, if we discuss about the advantages, the very first point, that ABC, the purpose of ABC is that it leads to a fair allocation, so that you get a more accurate cost per unit. If you have a more accurate cost per unit, you can improve your strategy and decision making. So the first point can be leads to fair allocation of overheads, right? And then the how one thing leads to the other. So fair allocation means more accurate cost per unit. More accurate cost per unit means a more improved strategy and decision making. Another advantage which ABC offers you is that it gives you a better insight into what is causing the cost, into what is causing the overhead cost that you are incurring, and how you can eventually control those costs. Once you know what is causing them, you will also be able to control. So I'm just summarizing like the subheaders over here. You can just learn them and expand them on your own. Then the third advantage that we get is that ABC recognizes that overheads are not all production or sales related. So, the absorption costing method is only either taking the number of units that we are producing or the number of units that we are selling. But ABC is a method which recognizes that not all overheads are related to sales or production. They can also relate to other cost pools where the costs are incurred because of a specific reason, the cost drivers behind them. So it recognizes not all overheads are production or sales related, right? Then another advantage that ABC offers us is that ABC can be applied to derive costs in the complexity of a machine-based business environment. So in today's era where we have a lot of machines to perform all sorts of tasks, it can be applied to derive the costs in such a scenario. Applied to derive costs in complex environments. Right? Another advantage that we can possibly think about ABC is that it can also be applied easily to your service costing, applied easily to service costing. Another advantage that we can possibly think of is that it can also be applied to, all sorts of overheads and not just production related overheads, because it's going to identify the cost drivers. So it can be applied to all sorts of overheads, not just production overheads. So these are basically the advantages that we can derive from using activity-based costing. Now we can have a look at disadvantages, because like the two sides of the coin, there will always be advantages that come with disadvantages. So the disadvantages basically will accrue when there is a limited benefit if the overhead costs are primarily volume related, or if your overheads are a small proportion of the overall cost, like we just discussed above. So the point over here can be limited benefit, and you know in which scenario will it give a limited benefit. And the second disadvantage that we can possibly talk about is that it is impossible to allocate all overhead costs to specific activities. So, you may not always be able to find a cost driver for all sorts of costs. So some costs you will still have to allocate according to maybe the production volume or maybe the sales volume. So impossible to find cost drivers for all costs, right? Then the third disadvantage that we can possibly talk about is that the choice of activities and cost drivers might be inappropriate. So you might think that some cost is being incurred because of something, but actually the reason is different. So the choice of activities and the cost drivers that you choose for those activities may also be inappropriate. So inappropriate choice of activities and cost drivers. So this is another point that you can mention if asked about the disadvantages of ABC. Another point that we can possibly think is that it can be more complex to explain to the shareholders, because the allocation may be only done by some people who are qualified, who have learned how ABC costing works. So it may be complex to explain to the shareholders. Another thing that you can talk about is that the benefit may not justify costs. Benefit may not justify costs. So when it comes to implementing this system, it can be expensive. So there may be a possibility that you have spent a lot of money in implementing the system, but you're not getting as much benefit from this system. Another thing that can be a disadvantage is that it can be time consuming to find the cost pools and the cost drivers. And then the last disadvantage that you can possibly talk about is that different cost accounting records will needed to be, to be maintained in order to implement ABC. So different cost accounting records will need to be maintained if you want to implement ABC. So these basically are the disadvantages that you can talk about regarding the activity-based costing method. Now let's discuss the reasons for introducing ABC. Reasons for introducing ABC. Now, why possibly can we implement ABC? So first of all, it is the public responsibility to do this. The resources that we have are limited. So, we should be controlling the cost. There should be a tight control. So the first thing is public responsibility. Then the next thing that we have is also public accountability. What do we mean by accountability? That the money that the taxpayers are giving to the government should be spent wisely. So in basically a public sector, you have public responsibility, public accountability, and then you have resource allocation with organizations. So basically, you should ensure that the distribution of your scarce resources is more equitable. Not just the rich people are getting richer, the poor people should also be getting the benefits of the development that there's going on. And then the last point why ABC may be implemented is helping the managers to manage, helping managers. So basically, managers will need better awareness of what activities are actually causing which costs before they can think that, this is something that we can cut out on. So if the managers will know where we are spending how much, they will be in a better position to implement, cutting of those costs. They can try to reduce those costs. So these are possibly the reasons why ABC can be introduced in an organization. Now let's talk about throughput accounting. Throughput accounting. So whenever you talk about throughput accounting, there are two things which should instantly come to your mind. And the two things that I'm talking about over here are, first of all, the just-in-time system, and the second thing is total quality management. Whenever you are talking about throughput accounting, there's going to be an involvement of a just-in-time system and total quality management. Total quality management means that each and every aspect of your production should be managed so that the quality of your production is good. Now, when it comes to throughput accounting, we also have the formula you must have studied. So let's revise that. Throughput will always be equal to your sales revenue minus just your direct material cost. So do not absolutely confuse this with contribution. Contribution and throughput will always be two different things. Contribution is nothing but your selling price minus all variable costs, whereas throughput is sales revenue minus just the cost of the direct material. So this is how we calculate throughput. And then there's also a concept of bottleneck when it comes to throughput accounting. So bottleneck basically is the factor that prevents the throughput from being higher. So throughput is basically like something that we earn. So bottleneck is any factor that will prevent the throughput from going up, from going high. So in the long term, basically when we are employing throughput accounting, our long-term aim is that we should eliminate the bottleneck. So I'll just write it down for you. So long-term, the goal is to eliminate the bottleneck. So this is what our aim is in the long run. Then again, this is a cost accounting technique. It also comes with its assumptions. It's very important that you understand the assumptions well. So just so that you're able to also recollect in which situations this will be useful, and there can be theoretical questions on assumptions also. So the assumptions of throughput accounting are, number one, the only totally variable cost in the short term is the purchase cost of raw materials that are bought from external suppliers. That is why to find out the throughput, it is only subtracting the direct material, because throughput accounting assumes that the only totally variable cost in the short term is the direct material cost. This is the first assumption. Then the second assumption that we have in throughput accounting is that the direct labor costs are not variable in the short run. So many employees are salaried, and even if they are paid at a rate per unit, they are usually guaranteed a minimum weekly wage. So that is why the direct labor costs are considered fixed in the short run. So if we talk about the assumptions, if we try to list them down, so the first one will be only totally variable cost is your direct material cost. And the second assumption which we have is that the direct labor cost is not variable in the short run. So these are the two assumptions that we have discussed so far. Another assumption that the throughput accounting has is that, given these assumptions, throughput is effectively the same as contribution. So because, contribution is nothing but your sales minus variable cost takes two things, direct material and direct labor. So since it is assuming direct labor as not variable, it is assuming that contribution is same as my throughput. Right? So these are the three assumptions that we have under throughput accounting. Now, throughput accounting is again based on the theory of constraints. Theory of constraints is useful when there is one resource that is blocking you from earning higher throughput. So according to the theory of constraints, there are four steps in theory of constraints. So what are these four steps? So basically the step one in this theory is that you identify the bottleneck. Identify bottleneck. So you should know that which resource is the one that you have in a lesser quantity than you actually need. Then the second step in this process is that you decide how to exploit the bottlenecks. So there can be multiple factors that can prevent you from earning money. So decide how you are going to exploit these bottlenecks. And then in the third step, you're going to subordinate everything else to the decision in step two. Now, what do we mean by this? Subordinate everything else to decision in step two. Now, what do we mean by this is that once we have identified what the bottlenecks are and we have decided how we are going to exploit these bottlenecks, now everything is going to revolve around these bottlenecks. We are going to see what can we do to make the best use of these bottlenecks. These are available with us in a limited quantity, so we have to optimize the use of that. So that is why we are going to subordinate everything else. Everything else will come later. First thing we will do is how we will exploit these bottlenecks. Everything will be decided according to how we exploit the bottlenecks. And the last step will be elevate the system's bottlenecks. Elevate the bottlenecks. So we will also try that we improve the capacity of the bottleneck. Whatever is the limiting factor, we try to get more of that. So this is about the four steps in the theory of constraints. Now let's talk about the various formulas that are involved with throughput accounting. So when it comes to the formulas, you can also, since we are revising all of the things, you can also note down all the formulas in one place. So the first formula that we learn in throughput accounting is the throughput per factory hour. So you can also call it as throughput or the return per factory hour. So how do you calculate that? Per factory hour. So you calculate that using throughput per unit, and you divide that by the product's time on the bottleneck resource. So this is essentially the formula of the throughput per factory hour. Now, the second formula that we learn is the cost per factory hour. Now, this cost is going to be found out using the total factory cost, and you divide that by the total bottleneck resource time that is available. Total bottleneck resource time which is available. Now, the last formula that we have is the TPAR, which you may also be asked to calculate in your exam. So this will be nothing but your return per factory hour divided by your cost per factory hour. So the first two formulas that we learned are the ones that are going to be used to ultimately work out your TPAR. Now, this is all that we learn about throughput accounting. This is all the bookish knowledge that is there to gain. Now, the practice onus lies on you guys. I'm just, revising the concepts for you. Now, we are moving on to the next concept, which is the concept of target costing. Now we're going to be talking about target costing. So always remember that when we are doing target costing, it is basically we are trying to reduce the costs. So basically, it is a cost reduction technique in the development phase of a product. So you can also say that this is the opposite of cost plus pricing method. So in the cost plus pricing method, what do? Is that we find out the cost and we find out the cost and then we add some sort of profit margin according to that cost. Maybe let's suppose 10% of that cost. So this is cost plus pricing. But in target costing, we are doing the opposite. We are setting a target for ourselves that this is what the cost should be, and then we will decide our margins accordingly. So basically, target cost gap will be the difference between your estimated product cost, which is your actual one, estimated cost minus what you had set your target to be. So perhaps I set my target cost to be $10, but actually I'm able to produce that for $15. So 5 is my target cost gap. That means I had planned it to get it done at $10, but I'm actually spending $15 on the same. So $5 worth of cost gap is what I have with me. Now, cost gap can also be reduced using your value analysis. It is a technique wherein you are analyzing, value. Value will always be a function of use and esteem. How much the customer is going to derive value, how much use the customer can get out of the product, and how much esteem, how respected he would feel by using your product. So usually when it comes to let's suppose iPhones, people think that it's a common conception over here that people who have iPhones are rich. So for iPhones, people have a lot of esteem value. So basically, value analysis will use both of these things, use and esteem, in order to find out what the customers find useful, whether they find respect with with one of the features of the products. So with this, they analyze the cost gap and whether it can be closed by reducing any of the features. So this is what we learn about target costing. And with target costing, we are often asked that, target costing, using this target costing method is problematic when it comes to service organizations. So problems with target costing in service organizations. So what are the reasons why we face problems with target costing in service organizations? First of all, there's an intangibility. When it comes to services are intangible. These are also the features of services. So services are intangible. That means we cannot see or touch a service. So this is why when you are not able to, it's difficult to set targets when intangibility is in the scenario. Then there is also an inseparability. That means, I cannot separate the service from the service giver. Who is, who's responsible to give the service will only have to provide the service to the customer. I cannot separate the service from the service provider. So this becomes another problem when we are trying to implement target costing in service organizations. Another problem is the heterogeneity. This means that no two services that we provide will be the same. So perhaps if there's a salon that offers maybe a pedicure, so maybe some person is having cleaner feet, so it might take lesser efforts to clean their feet, but someone who has way dirty feet will probably take a longer time to clear. So this is what we mean by heterogeneity. The service that will be provided, even though the service is of pedicure, but the degree of that service cannot be the same. It's not a good, or it's a service, so it will differ from person to person. Now another thing is the perishability. So by perishability we mean we cannot actually store a service. So if I have a salon and I have people who provide pedicures, so I cannot store the pedicures. Those people will have to be called whenever the pedicures have to be given, and they will then only be able to provide the pedicures. So this is why the services are perishable, they cannot be stored. Right. So the fifth point that we talk about regarding why it's problematic to have target costing in service organizations is that there is no transfer of ownership. So when you're really trying to have a look at when your the sales are completed, so in terms of goods, when we are dealing in goods, and once we have this was I was the manufacturer. Once I have handed over it to the wholesaler, then there's a transfer of ownership. I have taken the money and transferred the ownership of the goods to the wholesaler. Now the wholesaler is the owner of the goods. But when it comes to services, there is no transfer of ownership. The services provided and consumed at the same time. So because of the problem that there is no transfer of ownership, it also creates a problem while we are implementing target costing in service organizations. So this is basically all that we have theoretically to study about the target costing. Now let's start about life cycle costing. So when it comes to life cycle costing, we are basically trying to find out how much money are we incurring on a product in total on its entire useful life. So maybe we are producing that product for a period of 5 years. So all of the costs that we are going to incur over the 5-year timeline is something that we are going to take into consideration, and also take into consideration the number of units that we are producing over these 5 years. So basically your life cycle cost per unit will be nothing but the total cost of the product, total costs of product over the entire life cycle. So for example, in which we have assumed 5 years. So all of the costs that have been incurred in 5 years, and divide that by the total number of units produced. Total number of units produced of that product. So this is how you're going to find out the life cycle cost. Now, what are the factors that you are, supposed to manage in order to maximize the product's return over the life cycle? So basically, there are a lot of things that you can consider while you want to maximize the return that you earn with the product. So you are in the business to make money, and money will be made once you do everything that is possible to maximize the returns. So first of all, you can design, first of all, the first thing that you can consider is the designing cost. So anything and everything which can be avoided must be avoided so that you minimize on these costs, so that the profits are maximized. Then minimize the time to market. What do we mean by that? So the earlier we bring our product into the market, the earlier we are going to make sales. So minimize the time that it's going to take you to bring your product to the market. Then the third thing that you can consider is you minimize the break-even point. So how do you minimize the break-even point? So break-even point is the point where there are no profits that you are incurring, you're at a no profit or no loss situation. So this will be minimized when you minimize your costs. So again, if you work out a way to reduce the cost that you are incurring, then your the break even will also be minimized. Another way is to maximize the length of the life cycle. So perhaps if I'm able to sell that product for 5 years, I'm going to try to find out ways that I can sell that product itself for 7 years, maybe, to maximize the length of the life cycle. The more that I sell, the more money that I make. So these are some of the factors that I can consider to maximize the return that I earn on a product. Now, another thing that we need to know about life cycle costing is that it is an excellent tool when it comes to assessing the alternatives in the procurement of large assets, because it will help you to find out to compare the entire life cycle costs over the entire life cycle benefits. So it's an excellent tool for you to assess the alternatives when you are considering the procurement of large assets. Now we move to the next specialist accounting technique, which is EMA, Environmental Management Accounting. So first of all, we learn ways in which environmental issues can possibly impact our financial performance. So financial performance will be impacted by the environment in the following ways. So first of all, if the environmental issues are not arising, the environment is in our favor. So first of all, our revenue can be improved. Then if we take good advantage, we can also reduce our costs, so cost reductions. And again, at the if we are using too much of the environment, if we are polluting the environment, there can be increase in the costs in the form of penalties from the governments and regulatory bodies. And the fourth point will be the costs of failures. So basically, the failures will be, the costs that we are unable to prevent because we are, harming the environment. So these are the ways in which your environment can affect your financial performance, any business's financial performance. Now, when it comes to the techniques that we have under EMA, what are the techniques that we have? So the first technique that we have under EMA is our input-output analysis. So when it comes to the input-output analysis, it means that in both physical and monetary terms, businesses are forced to focus on environmental costs. So as the name suggests, input and output. So basically, you will be considering both the physical as well as the monetary terms. That means physical as in how much input you are getting, how much input you are putting to find how to get how much output is the physical form, and money as in how much money you are inputting and how much money are you getting out of the project is what the input output analysis will focus on. Then another technique which exists under EMA is the flow cost accounting. So under the flow cost accounting, over here, your material flows are going to be divided into 3 categories. The first category is going to be material. Second category is going to be system and delivery. And the third category is going to be the disposal. So these are the 3 categories, and the values and costs of each of these are estimated. By values, I mean benefits. How much benefit and how much cost are we incurring on all of the 3 categories. Then another thing which you can another technique which you can implement in EMA is ABC, and another technique which you can implement is life cycle costing. So these both costing techniques which we have studied above can also be integrated with the environment management accounting. Now let's move on quickly to the advantages of the EMA. So advantages will be, first of all, better, or you can say fairer product costs, because now using environmental accounting you are also considering the impact that you are having on the environment because of the production that you're undertaking. So you get a better product cost. That means you are also taking into consideration the harm that you're causing to the environment, and that cost also gets added to the cost of the product. Another thing, again, improved pricing. Now you'll know how much you are causing because of the harm to the environment. So you will also be able to add that cost and transfer to the consumer. Then better environmental cost control, better environmental cost control. By this, we mean that, we will be considering how much money we are spending because of our environmental costs. So when we know how much we are spending on what, we will be able to also control that better. Another advantage that we can possibly get is that it is likely to integrate environment into our strategic management process, into what I can say is strategy. So with this, cost accounting method, businesses will also be taking into consideration the environment effect that they are causing, and this will also somehow get integrated into their strategy. Then the next point that we have is that it facilitates the quantification of cost savings from environmental friendly measures. So basically, we are, because of the environmentally friendly policies that we are producing, consumers are probably trying to buy our products more because we are now, an environment conscious company. So with this EMA in the picture, we will also be able to quantify how much money or how much benefit are we getting due to becoming an environmentally friendly company. Then another benefit that we can talk about is that it reduces the potential for cross subsidization of environmentally damaging products. So basically, this means that probably if we are producing some kinds of products that cancel out each other's environmental effects, this also reduces the potential for such products which actually cause damage to the environment. So I'm just putting down the first two words, reduces potential, or perhaps I can write the full thing, for cross subsidization of environmentally damaging products. So this is all that we talk about the advantages of EMA. Now let's move on to the last topic, which comes to the disadvantages of EMA. And with that, we will be able to finish the entire fourth chapter. So the very first disadvantage of EMA is that, again, it is time consuming. So this is a disadvantage that remains common among most of the specialist cost accounting techniques that we have learned, that this is a time consuming strategy. Then it is also expensive to implement. Implementing the EMA strategy is not very cost effective, it is expensive. And then another disadvantage that we can talk about is that determining accurate costs and cost drivers is again difficult, which is something that we used in ABC disadvantages also. Costs and cost drivers, you can expand this accordingly. So identifying or determining the accurate costs and cost drivers may be difficult. Another disadvantage that you can mention over here is that external costs cannot be experienced by the company. So, the external costs which are borne by the public in general, perhaps the company has polluted the environment. So, the people are eventually going to breathe polluted air. So, these are some of the costs which will never be experienced by the company. And then another disadvantage when it comes to EMA is that some environmental costs are intangible. Some environmental costs are intangible. That means we are not able to identify all of the environmental costs. And because of this intangibility, we are not able to see or touch those costs. So it becomes even more difficult to also integrate those costs under EMA. So that's another disadvantage. And then lastly, a company that is incorporating environmental costs may be at a competitive disadvantage to rivals who are not doing this. Now, this can also be counter agreed by saying, that the consumers nowadays are preferring companies which are environmentally conscious. However, this still remains a point that if the rivals are not doing something like this, then it'll be a disadvantage to the company. So it can be a competitive disadvantage. So these are the possible points that you can talk about when it comes to disadvantages of EMA. With this, we have wound up with chapter number 4 of your PM syllabus. We'll catch you in the next video where we'll be revising the chapter number 5. Thank you so much.